Welcome to a sunny new podcast where I'll be speaking to people from the arts, business and beyond, and shining a light on their stories of success on the South Coast. This week's guest is Luke Williams, the head of AI at Intergage Group. Luke wanted to build robots when he was a kid, and he's maintained a passion for new technology ever since, most recently focusing on AI. In this episode, we talk about how people's willingness to accept AI will be the biggest barrier to its adoption, AI statements and why all businesses need one. Campfire, the new community Intergage has created in partnership with the Dorset Chamber to help businesses get the most from AI, plus a load of practical use cases for AI that you can try today. By the way, this intro was presented by an AI-created avatar called the Stu 1000. Now I'll hand you over to the real thing. Welcome, Luke. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you're group head of AI at Intergage, and I first met you speaking at a LinkedIn local event where you gave an amazing introduction to AI. And what I really loved about it was really packed with practical advice. So we're here today to talk all things AI.
Cool.
But before we get into that, I always think it's interesting to understand a little bit about the person behind the work. And I know that you've always worked in various tech and IT, from the early days of pay-per-click and SEO, digital marketing, social media, and you've worked for some iconic South Coast brands over that time. So what I just wanted to ask is, you talk about always wanting to create new business opportunities and advance the use of technologies in the companies you work for. So I just wondered, for the benefit of the audience, if you could share a little bit about your journey to this point and how technology's always played a role in the work you do.
So one thing I've always tried to do is create practical applications for new technology. So be that in my earliest days in the career when I worked in mobile data, so I worked alongside a large mobile manufacturer in their data support team, and I was supporting the very early use of mobile web stuff, right through to, as you said, social media and pay-per-click and SEO, and generally adopting like web technologies. It's always been, a application of digital innovation has always been like a recurring theme. I've also always loved training and coaching people, and so that's been a big part of what I've done all the way through my career, is speaking at events or running workshops. And I'm really lucky that I get to do that with the latest technological thing at the moment, which is obviously AI. So my role at the moment is making sure we make best use of AI across our group of companies, and also working with our clients and customers and other organizations to deliver training and workshops. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And on my journey through that, I've been lucky enough to work with the RNLI for 5 years at Farrow, and also when I run my own agency, worked with some great names. That was predominantly social media stuff, but I did a little bit with some household names there. And it's really been everything from small to medium to large organizations, charity sector. And I feel quite lucky that I've been able to do all of those things through my career so far. But it's not luck, it's choices I've made.
Well, like you said, I think one of the great things is the fact you've managed to combine the tech and the training. That must be really enjoyable, that aspect. I mean,
for me, something I've always been really passionate about is actual applications of technology, because I think particularly at the moment there's a lot of people who are hyping a lot of the AI technologies that's coming up, things that are going to be in the future 6, 12, 5 years away even, and actually there's so much happening so rapidly that it's quite overwhelming for a lot of people. A very common thing I hear when I'm running workshops is people saying, there's so many tools out there, where do I begin? And I always flip that on its head when I run a workshop, particularly start from the use cases. What is it you want to do, and work from there. And I think that simple thing opens people's eyes hopefully. Well, no, it does. I get great feedback from workshops, so I know it does in a non-arrogant way. I can say that I know it does because that's feedback I get regularly. Is that it's. Someone said to me the other day actually, I liked your talk because unlike some of the others I've been to, which were all hype and no trousers, yours had some real substance to it. And I thought it was an odd turn of phrase to say, that other talks have been all hype and no trousers, but I kind of understand what they meant by that, And similar to what you were saying from the LinkedIn Live thing that you came to, LinkedIn Local, was that, I try and ground everything in practical applications. It's the same with my newsletter, it's the same with my talks, whether it's a workshop, whatever it is, I'll always try and give things people can take away from it.
Yeah, well, I can definitely say from a personal point of view, you definitely did that successfully, hence the reason for me asking you to join me today. But we're going to touch on some of those areas that you talked on in that introduction. But I guess just to kind of start getting into the AI, as you mentioned, you've always worked in areas of digital innovation. I guess it's a natural evolution in a way for you to be working in AI now. But when did you first start getting interested in AI?
Sure. I mean, I think like everyone, in November 22 when ChatGPT came out, bizarrely for me, I was actually in an airport in Lanzarote and our flight was delayed. And I just happened to be browsing Twitter when they released it. I went straight onto it and sort of having a little bit of play with it. And I was there with one of my friends who's also works in the kind of IT field. And I remember just stopping and going to him, can I swear on this? I don't know.
You can.
Holy crap. This thing is a serious step forward. And, I've always had an interest in things like machine learning and, I'd done a little bit of kind of data science work when I was at the RNLI alongside our team of researchers that were there. But actually this was the first time I saw something and it really stopped me in my tracks and I went, this is bigger than I was expecting it to be. And so from then on I started playing with ChatGPT like many other people did, but it was just this weird coincidence that I happened to be stuck in an airport at the exact moment it was released and I had time to kill and nothing much really other than a phone and a bottle of water. So I just sat there playing with it straight away and realised this is a pretty significant thing.
It's a game changer.
Yeah. And when you start to think through the implications of it, they're pretty wide and varied. I think some of the predictions are a bit crazy, and some of them are probably underestimating it. But for me, that was kind of really what kicked it off. But I'd had a bit of an interest in that kind of field before, in terms of using bits of machine learning in amongst other programs where they were. And then, I started to experiment with it a little bit while I was still at Farrow. And then this opportunity came up and I joined Intergage a year ago. As their sort of first dedicated AI hire, really, with the ridiculous job title of Group Head of AI. And I love it, really, just I should say that clearly to my boss. But it's just because I work at a group level. So we're a group of B2B marketing experts in different flavours. So, one of the groups in the company specialises in HubSpot, so HubSpot Diamond Partner, so real experts in that field. And then, we have other companies that work in different ways and different niches, including a labs part which experiments with building AI tools as well, and I work at a group level, so that's why I'm group head of. It's just sounds slightly over ridiculous if you don't know I work in a group of companies, perhaps, I don't know, but I'm not a super data scientist. I've done a little bit of that in the past, but my background is applying new technology to business, and that's what hopefully I do day to day.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, we're going to get into all of that, but I thought it's probably useful just to set the scene a little bit. I know, going back to that talk that I sat through, you were really emphasising the pace of change and how it's accelerating. I think you were talking back then about the amount of information, or I think you called them tokens, that you could feed into these AI models. And I remember, I think you said it was back in November 22, it was the equivalent to a quarter of a single book.
Yeah, it's about sort of 8 pages of A4, roughly.
8 pages. And then by the middle of this year, that's expanded to an entire bookshelf of information. So how would you describe the current state and what's your thoughts on the further?
Well, there's an important caveat to that. So I sort of said I felt the growth was exponential, right? And across roughly 6-month intervals, it went from 8 pages to 2 to 3 books to about a bookshelf. Since that talk, there's a model come out that can do another factor up again, which is about 750 books worth of information, which is a library. So when we talk about tokens, this is the way that so we're talking particularly here about the context. So this is the amount of information you can put in that you're asking questions about to the AI chatbot tool or whatever it is. So this is the amount of information you can ask it about effectively of your own that you've uploaded. So you'll know if you use ChatGPT, you can include files, and that's the kind of scaling that we've gone through over the last 2 years. And so, yeah, there's a model. It's not a very well-used model. It's quite a niche case one, but it has 100 million token context window. So when we talk about a token, that's a word or a part of a word, and it's just the way that the AI tools break down the information that they work with. And yeah, the context size, I would argue that is pretty much exponential growth. And what that allows you to do is it's gone from text to text to pictures, to text to video, text to audio, and all these kind of things. And actually being able to load in an hour's worth of video and ask questions about it is now possible because of the increase in these context sizes. You know, I could take a picture of you here and just say, what do you see in this scene? And it would describe it to us. And the level of detail that it will now pull out is phenomenal. You know, I do this as an experiment, as a sort of show and tell in my workshops, and I've had 2 this week. And both times the answer it's given me has blown everyone away in the room. So I've taken a picture of, you know, the first one was to a larger workshop in a hall, and it sort of said, you know, there's all these people there. I think you're running a workshop, but it picked out other things that no one had expected, and actually beyond what I'd expected. So it mentioned the parquet flooring. It talked about the natural light coming in through the windows, the chairs stacked up at the back. It said there's one person waving, one person putting up the V for victory sign at the back, the peace sign, sorry, it said. It picked up on the average expression in the room. It said everyone looks quite happy and relaxed. And the level of detail, I think, is beyond what most people realise it's capable for, of understanding the context within a picture, a screenshot, a video, text, whatever it might be. And yeah, I did it again at a workshop yesterday, which was in a smaller group in like an office room. And yeah, it picked up a couple of things I hadn't noticed in the room from our surroundings. And so yeah, I think another little game I like to play with people is, I don't think people realise how good prompting to create videos is getting. So, you know, if I look back 18 months ago, there's a great example that I'm not sure if I used at that talk actually, but it's one I like to do, where I wrote a prompt saying, can you give me 2 dogs in a field? And it gave this weird mutant beast with 1 head and 5 legs and kind of 2 bodies, but not fully. And, you know, it was clearly not very good. And there's that classic example that everyone shows of the Will Smith eating spaghetti video, where his face is a bit all over the place, and it's just, what the hell is that sort of nightmare fuel? If you do, you know, I did the same thing 2 weeks ago, and I think you would struggle. Like, I know it's AI generated, but I can't spot that I can't find anything in the photo that tells me it's AI. And this is, you know, that's the evolution in 18 months in the case of photos, and videos are very closely behind. So another thing I like to do is show a couple of videos and say, which ones of these are, you wrote a text prompt and it generated a 15-second video, and which of these are real videos. And I usually get, you know, the videos that I did 6 months ago, I would get about 50-50 for the first one that I usually use, and the second one, about a quarter would say this is AI generated and this is real. They were both AI generated. I used a similar prompt with a video for when I updated my slides about a month ago, and you know, almost everyone thinks it's real now. And this is, you know, that's the pace of change of video across, you know, the last couple of months. And OpenAI have got a tool coming out called Sora, and I'll let you all make your own minds up on this, but they're not releasing it until after the US elections.
That kind of says everything, doesn't it?
I'm not making an assumption there, but I am making an assumption there, obviously. But I think in itself that's quite a fascinating statement, that, you know, it's still in beta because it's being tested for safety, etc. But they're probably going to release it after the US election.
Yeah. I mean, it is scary how the video side of things has improved so much. I've looked a little bit at these video prompting tools because I'm quite a film geek.
Yep.
And I've seen people recreating these kind of like 50s versions of like classic sci-fi films.
Yep.
And the whole worlds that these guys are creating, it's almost getting to the point where you can't tell the difference between what they're doing in like a proper Hollywood studio.
Yeah, and you know, I think a large chunk of the population probably aren't aware how good some of this technology is. And that's one of the things, you know, I like to start a workshop by setting the scene and saying, look, the context size has gone from here to here, so the amount of information you can put in and ask it questions about, the capabilities have gone up, but also the ability for it to generate pictures, audio, images. I've created a deep fake of myself, which I think we've talked about before as well.
We'll come to that in a little bit, because I want to talk about that. Yeah, because I've had fun playing with HeyGen as well. But I think the other part of the context that you shared that I think is important probably to talk a little bit about is that AI is already everywhere and part of everyday life. And I think sometimes people don't quite know that, do they? They don't think that. They might think of the likes of Google Assistant and Alexa, but they probably don't necessarily think about recommendations on Amazon shopping feeds, or the fact that Netflix optimised thumbnails for individuals.
You were listening to my talks. That's an example I use, So most people aren't aware that with Netflix, you and I might have the same film recommendations, and I think we're both sci-fi nerds, so that's probably accurate. But actually, we'll get different thumbnails for the same programs, but they have around 20 for some programs, where it's just tweaks of what the thumbnails are based on your viewing history, and that is learned through a machine learning algorithm. Which simple things like that. I think also when I've had a couple of people at talks I've given that say, we've decided we're not going to use AI because it's insecure, it's the security concerns we have. I think the problem with that is you get AI results within Google. So you're not going to use Google now, fair enough, or Bing. In Microsoft Office you can get Copilot within that, so you're going to not use Microsoft Office. What's your customer database system? Is it HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever? They have AI built in and baked into it. So I think we're at a point where something I've always said all the way along is standalone applications are not necessarily going to become the norm. There will be some, but actually it's going to become a part of everything. It's going to be built into these existing tools and used in ways. You mentioned Google. You can get it within Gmail and other things just on your phone. And I think, it's those kind of creeping uses that we're just seeing more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, I must admit I've been a massive fan of things like Google Assistant. For me, it's just so useful.
Yeah, me too.
And just to see, like you said, it is. I'd never thought of it like that, but it has almost like crept up on me. And then suddenly you realise, wow, you're actually using it for all these things. And personally, I'm really excited to see where that kind of use of it goes in the future.
Yeah, we've got a big moment coming up soon. So in the start of December, the latest iPhone with Apple Intelligence is released in the UK. So obviously we've got the phone now, but actually the Apple Intelligence aspect. So this is an OpenAI implementation by Apple. Is coming out to consumers on the 1st December. So I'm a Google phone guy, so I've got Gemini on my phone already. But actually, when Siri and Google Assistants are now Gemini or Apple Intelligence, there's a whole further level of integration, things it can do for you. We're moving towards that idea of like AI agents that actually can do useful things rather than just giving them specific little tasks that we go back and forth on in a chat window. Yeah, no,
that's really amazing. What are you using? Because I'm an Android guy as well. What are you using Gemini for then?
So one of the things, it's a slightly odd use case, but one of the things I love Gemini for is it's really great for interrogating YouTube videos. So because they're both Google products, you can ask Gemini to create a summary of a video and say, where are the bits about a particular part of AI that you're interested in once you've got that summary. And I find that really useful. My boss, love him, sends me a lot of videos. And, sometimes, you'll be familiar with it. You watch a YouTube video and there's 5 minutes of like, hey, welcome to this. If you want to like and subscribe, here's like, blah, blah, blah. And they can sometimes waffle on. And quite often, within, say, a 1 or 2 hour video, actually there's maybe 10, 15 minutes of stuff you really want to know. And I just find that a great way of shortcutting, right? What's the level of depth of this? Where are the bits I want to listen to? So that's one thing I use Gemini for. Just little bits on my phone, as a personal assistant for reminding myself to do things or, whatever it might be.
No, I love it. Yeah, no, I need to get some more tips off camera about how you're using it. Sorry to interrupt the chat. Just a quick one to ask a favour. If you're enjoying this episode, then please rate, review or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Now back to the episode. Can I just ask, because we always hear people talk about generative AI.
Yep.
And I think these kind of uses that we're talking about, these are generative AI, right?
Yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit about what that is, and if that is all we kind of hear about, what is non-generative AI?
Sure. Okay. How long have we got? Yeah. So sometimes when I like to talk about the kind of the history. So AI as a field has been around since the 50s. There's a conference I think it was Plymouth in the States, where they sort of said, what if rather than us having to program every step of machines, what if they can learn for themselves? What if there's that kind of feedback loop and actually rather than us having to code, if this, do that, then that, or loop this or whatever, actually if it can work that stuff out and grow and learn from itself. That's where kind of AI started. Up until I would say that kind of chat GPT release in November 22, what you had mostly was narrow forms of AI, which some people would call machine learning. So that's where it was, an algorithm that determines the thumbnails, or where it's a specific narrow use case like that. Generative AI, so generative pre-trained transformer, which is the GPT part of ChatGPT, was a method that was developed, and actually one of the guys recently got a Nobel Prize for that. Which is just essentially, and there's a great phrase I love, and if you don't already, go follow Kate Bevan. She was the former Which tech editor, does a great podcast on AI, but she used the phrase that ChatGPT is just a spicy autocomplete. It's a phrase I absolutely love, and if you think of it as a spicy autocomplete rather than as a search engine, and if you remember nothing else from this conversation, then that's probably the one thing that'll make a difference, because essentially what it's done is they've trained it on lots and lots of things, and it finds a common connection between them. And then when you're asking it a question based on probability and statistics, etc., it's working out what the likely next combination of words are. And so it is, really, now that's massively oversimplifying it, but at its core, it is a spicy autocomplete. And I think you need to understand that if you want to get the best from it. Where the waters kind of get a bit muddy is that was great 6 months, a year ago to explain it that way, because models were trained up to a certain date. And so if you ask them about something after that date, people would do it as a big, gotcha, AI is not that smart because actually it didn't know that such and such was the president of wherever. But that's just because of the way they work. But now where they also connect to the internet and can look things up, that line's got blurred a little bit. But at its heart, it still is basically a spicy autocomplete, and if you know that will help you to use it in a better way.
Excellent. I'll have to remember that. I like that. Spicy autocomplete.
Kate Bevan, I take no I don't take ownership of that. That's completely stolen from her.
So we've talked about, there's been some major kind of milestones over the last couple of years then. November 22, ChatGPT v3. And you've talked about, text to images going all the way through to text to video now.
And vice versa, so being able to read and understand them as well. It's not just a one-way thing.
And that is so handy, like you say. I mean, I think it's the same thing for books as well as video. Actually kind of boiling them down rather than having to read the whole thing. Like, tell me the key points of learning. Just so time-consuming. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the use cases and so on, and you've mentioned Digital Luke already. I just wanted to ask your thoughts, like a bit further afield, because like you say, I think that a lot of the publicity is always looking well into the future, but I think it's kind of timely because we had the Tesla We Robot event just a couple of weeks ago. Where they were demoing a new version of their robot, and they had some unbelievable footage of the thing cleaning tables and helping around the house, serving drinks and things. And I think earlier this year, Elon Musk was talking about how he thought there'd be 1 billion humanoid robots by 2040. I just wondered, what were your thoughts when you saw Tesla's Optimus robot?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got to go backwards in history a little bit. So if you'd have asked, 7 or 8 year old Luke what he wanted to do when he grew up, right? He wanted to make robots. That was his thing. And I wanted to do that up until kind of university. And then I didn't do so well in my A levels. And I ended up, moving into sort of towards electronics and then computing. But little Luke at heart fundamentally wanted to build robots, right? So I'm absolutely fascinated and will watch anything related to robotics that I can still. For me, actually, Figaro 1 was a more interesting robotic company. So I don't know if you've come across them. They did a demo a few months ago where they announced a partnership with OpenAI because they got this great robot, but its human interaction wasn't fantastic. They announced a partnership with OpenAI. Within 3 weeks, they had it integrated, and it just leapt forward a huge amount in capability in terms of it being able to understand its surroundings, being able to interact with a human and feel much more natural. So watching that one was great to see another company doing it. And, for little geek me, was just fascinating. But I think it's those kind of advances that maybe aren't getting as many headlines in some quarters. I mean, that one obviously did because it's Elon Musk and it's robots. But yeah, I think what AI is unlocking a lot of stuff in other fields, and robotics and self-driving cars and all these things are, really great. And I think one thing that needs to catch up is kind of people's perception. Something that we've talked about at Intergage is just, we're close to the point where I could create a voice clone that you can speak to via a phone that's an AI version of me or my boss or whoever. But at the moment there's still a little bit of time lag, and at the moment you can still just about tell that it's an AI.
I've done the test with Paul.
Right, okay, yeah. So we did a little pilot where you can put in your name and phone number, and a fake version of my boss will call you back. It's a real voice clone of him will call you back. And yeah, it's a bit disjointed at the moment, but that's going to improve soon. But
it does give you an idea already, though, doesn't it, of what's possible?
And that's kind of the point of it, was not so much that this is ready and that this is the absolute perfect use case, but more we were testing a few technologies, because there's a few things along the pipeline there, the way the website connected to that tool and passed the lead over and all of those kind of steps. But also the point was, where are we now and where do we think it could go? But I think the bit that needs to catch up is people's perception. So, if let's say we were here and your Wi-Fi went down when we were recording this, right, and you're like, oh, sorry, Luke, we've got to stop, I just need to fix this, and I ring whoever your broadband provider is. You go on hold for 20 minutes and eventually maybe get through to a human person, right? If you had a shortcut and it would go to an AI agent, and 99% of the time that could help you straight away, that's a really significant change. Your time you've wasted to fix that problem has gone down. Yes, there are still going to be use cases that need to go to and be escalated to humans, and I'm a big believer that human plus AI is the best way forward.
Yeah, I know that throws up all these questions, doesn't it, about putting people out of work. But from a user point of view, the sooner that happens, the better, because the amount of time you waste in those type of scenarios. Yeah.
But at the moment, so my point is kind of that we as a society will still be playing catch up in terms of, are we comfortable speaking to an AI version of a customer support agent? Probably yes, because no one wants to spend 40 minutes or however long on hold, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to, if I ring a business rather than, say, a receptionist, if I get an AI answer, am I going to feel uncomfortable with that as a person? And I think there's a bit of a societal shift that will happen. But for some of those things, there's going to be a bit of the technology, I think, is probably moving faster than people's acceptance of that technology. Perhaps that's the better way of phrasing it. So people will start encountering this stuff, and some people's reaction will be, oh no, I don't want to speak to a robotic version of someone. Give me a press 1 for this and I'm happy. And these are just kind of evolutions in terms of machines answering the phone, right? We're all used to doing press 1 for whatever, but there are still some people that will all just press the hash key or 0 until they speak to someone, because they don't want to deal with those systems. And I think we're going to have the same adoption things, and coming back to the robot point, which is, sorry, I'm on a slight tangent there, but the point is, I think we'll have the same with the robots. It's not going to be so much the capabilities of them. That's not very far away now, I don't think. It's going to be people's perception of having a $30,000, and he's talking about $30,000 as his target price, right, for these robots. He's talking about, I think the gap is going to come not in that technology, not in its abilities, which will just improve exponentially through time, but is people's perception of seeing one in someone's home or meeting one in an office doing whatever task it's doing. That's the bit that's going to have to, that's where the actual shift in mindset's going to come.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. It's kind of like a mental acceptance, isn't it? Because there's going to be an element of fear, like, is this thing going to turn like Terminator on me?
and I'm going to make an odd prediction now. Some of the conspiracy nut parts of society are going to go crazy when these robots start rolling out, right?
Yeah.
Look at people's objection to 5G, which is based on no science at all. People burning down masts. Well, what are you going to have when you've got robots wandering around? No, but it's funny, but it's also serious, and something that I think about. I think, what are they going to make of that? This robot is always recording, and if I see one, I should run away from it, or are they going to attack them?
I think there will definitely be people.
I think they will.
Yeah, there will be people kind of that just don't want them in society, won't they? And will be attacking them.
Yeah, I mean, you already see it with those little delivery robots, which I always feel sorry for. You see videos of them getting stuck and people helping them out. But some of those have been abused and thrown in lakes and knocked over and stuff. Yeah. When that becomes a humanoid robot form factor, that's a whole different level of how do I feel seeing that, you know.
No, that's really interesting. I guess it kind of coming back down to kind of closer to reality at the moment, because like I said, one of the things I really liked about all your content is these kind of practical use cases, and all this kind of sexy stuff is coming, and like you say, coming really quickly. But in terms of like day-to-day uses now, you talked about uses of ChatGPT for things like idea generation. We talked about summarizing documents, transcribing meetings, which I think, and creating action lists, such a time saver.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think that's the number one first thing that probably I talk about when I speak at things about use cases. If you've got one thing you go away and try, it's using some of Otter or Fireflies or Copilot to record meetings online, because still a lot of our meetings are online, and equally you could record it using those apps on your phone and using that to transcribe a meeting, and then putting that into ChatGPT or wherever and saying, can you summarize the actions from this, or can you format it in this way to give me a first draft of a sales proposal, or can you summarize this to give me a summary I can send to the client under these headings. I think it's just such a simple way of saving time, and isn't it's not a value-based task that you're doing. It's just kind of like admin after you have a call.
Everyone hates doing it, don't they? And I think the other example you give that's similar was, I think you converted a web page into a presentation that you said, I think it took someone 2 days to do manually, and you did it in 7 minutes.
I felt a bit bad. So I was running a workshop a couple of months, I think it was about 2 weeks before I had that talk, actually, so a few months ago now, and I wanted to talk to them about, particularly in this case, about Microsoft Copilot. So first of all, Microsoft have like 5 different products they call Microsoft Copilot. So specifically Microsoft Copilot for Office 365, to give it its correct name. So this is where it's embedded within PowerPoint and Outlook and Word and all those things. And so as an example, because it has to work with a Word document, I can't point it to the web, or I couldn't at that point anyway. So I took their sustainability page, put it into a Word document, and then said, can you create me a PowerPoint from this? So it then goes through a few steps that it did for me. So it summarized it into 5 headings. So they weren't the 5 headings in the document. They were based on its analysis of the document. And then it created, I think it was 14 or 15 slides. It used 3 images within the slide deck, and it created it as a first draft. Now, I'm a big advocate that anything you generate with AI, you then go through a human editing process.
Absolutely.
We have a content checklist we use that we created, and I'm not claiming that it can just do it all instantly for you, but it got you to a point where it saved you a lot of time to do that. So I demoed that, and then someone in the room, I could see their face sort of changing a bit while I was talking about it, and I thought, have I lost them, and why? I'm not quite sure. And then she sort of said, I did that, and it took me a few days a little while ago. But what was great about the output in that case, and I'm not a huge fan of Microsoft Copilot for Office. I think it has quite a few bugs and flaws, if I'm honest. But one thing it did that was really good is it created those slides, so it created bullet points. It had put speaker notes, so it added additional context around that as a speaker notes, which is the way I work, and I think a good way of doing it. But it also included the original section it had taken within the speaker notes section in PowerPoint. It had taken, I based this on these parts from the original document.
That's
so you
really
had that
good,
whole audit trail, that whole thing you could reference, check the numbers quite easily, and then rewrite it. And start to finish took me 7 minutes. It did do like a couple of odd things. So it put the 3 photos in 3 separate slides at the very end, as well as using them within the presentation. No idea why. Just deleted them. Took me 2 seconds. Not a big problem. But she'd said that she'd spent a couple of days to do that, and this would have probably saved her a lot of that time. And I did feel a bit bad, but also kind of that was the point of that session, I guess, in a lot of ways.
And next time she and the rest of her colleagues are doing something, it's going to save them a lot of time going forward. I think another interesting AI use case I heard recently was I had on one of my prior guests, Oscar Brooks from V88,
right.
and he uses the Glide platform for creating solutions for businesses, and he was talking about recently how they've added like an AI component where you're literally building code through prompts now.
Yeah.
So not only creating text, creating videos and audio, but typing in, I want the code to do this, and it's actually generating that code, which I thought was pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, I had a good example of that fairly recently. So I keep everything in my Outlook diary about what I'm doing, and I kind of categorize it by, is it an internal thing, an external thing, all those kind of things. And sometimes I want to sit down and go through how much of my time is spent in these different areas. How long do I spend on research? How long do I spend on writing presentations that I then deliver? How much of my time is chargeable? And there's no way of doing that from Outlook to say, give me that summary.
No.
And if you Google it, it just says, what you can do is you can export it, a whole list of your appointments, into Excel as a CSV, and then you can add the categories up, kind of thing. But it's a bit clunky and it takes a while. So I just said to ChatGPT, look, this is what I want to do. It came up with 3 methods. One of those was the export, which I kind of already knew about and I tried, and it's not great. But one of them was like, you could probably create a little button using Visual Basic. I have never coded in Visual Basic ever. I don't think I've ever coded in Visual Basic. It's certainly not a language I've ever used. But it wrote all the code for me and said, you need to go here, open this window, press this, enable this, paste this code into here. It will create a button for you, and then it's there within Outlook. You can press this button and it will do that feature for you. And so I ran it and it failed first time I ran it. So I just took a screenshot of the error, put it back into ChatGPT, said, my bad. This is what I did wrong with the coding, corrected the code, put it back in. I then went through a similar problem. I couldn't get it quite. So the functionality was this simple. You put in a start and an end date, and it tells you the summary of the categories and how long you spent on each one. And I couldn't get it to work for a while. And the thing that took me the longest amount of time, and I'm prepared to admit this to the world and to you, it was using American date time, and I was using British.
Okay.
And because I was building it in June, and it was like 0206 was my date range, I didn't realise straight away. And that was the main problem I had building that thing. It took me a maximum of an hour, but now I've got a little button and I can press it and it does that summary for me. And I used another example. So Anthropic Claude, they released a thing called Artifacts, which is where when you use ChatGPT on a laptop, for example, you go back and forth within the chat window, but this opens a little side window if you're doing coding or if you're creating a document, and ChatGPT have just released something similar called Canvas, and it puts it on the right-hand side so you can talk about something and it updates the thing on the right-hand side. Great way of working if you're doing a little bit of code. So in 7 prompts, I made a really simple game using that. And again, I haven't coded for 20 years really properly.
Wow.
And it's a very simple game. It's just moving a little character around in a flat 2x2 grid, but it had monsters that randomly moved around it. It had, randomly generated maze basically to walk through from one corner to the other. It was 7 prompts to create that.
I need to have a play with that. That sounds quite fun.
I had someone at a talk, a panel thing I was at recently, and they said to me, it's great with all this kind of coding stuff, but I did think about getting back into coding, but now I think it's kind of not worth it. And I said, I've done more like writing little programs and coding in the last year or so than I've done for 20 years, because actually these things that I couldn't have done before, I can now get through it with 7 prompts or whatever. And that was a silly example, but equally it could have been a little calculator for a particular business function, or it could have been creating a first stab at what does a website look like, or it could have been any of those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, we can't leave this section without talking about Digital Luke, because you're at Digital Luke 2.0 as well.
There's been 2 iterations now, So I had the case where I wanted to experiment with a couple of tools. I picked one called HeyGen just for a number of reasons, but their privacy policy and security around the ownership of the data model and your likeness was I felt a bit stronger. So I had a situation where I needed to present 2 things at the same time. So one internally and one at an event. And obviously I'm not that clever that I can be in 2 places at once. I haven't yet got a robot version of me. So I created a digital avatar. So in my kitchen, I just put a phone on tripod and just recorded 2 minutes of video and then loaded it up. You have to do a quick, so there is, for security reasons, so you can't create a clone of someone else. You have to do a live little interactive bit via webcam once you've uploaded footage, and it looks at the biometrics, says, that's you, to give your permission to create that avatar. And then, I digitally presented at my internal event. So I sent Digital Luke along. Some people told me I should call him Duke because Digital Luke. Still not sure about that. Version 1 was just recording on a phone with no microphone. And for some reason, it gave me an American accent, a little bit. Not in every word, but some words it kind of had a bit of a twang, and it was kind of like, it's me, but it's not quite me. And yeah, so the opportunity came up. One of my colleagues had a camera in the office a couple of months later, so I re-recorded it with a proper lapel mic and that, and now I've got version 2 of Digital Luke, which again I've used it for a couple of things. So I was supposed to go to a networking event a couple of weeks ago, but I spent all day at a business show talking about Campfire to people at the Dorset Chamber Business Expo, and I completely lost my voice. So I just for a laugh, just recorded a quick little. I just type a script in, generated a quick video, put it on my LinkedIn to say, hey, it's Digital Luke. Luke's lost his voice. Sorry, I was hoping to catch up with some of you later. By the way, you should check this thing out. And weirdly, it was one of my best received posts on LinkedIn for a while. Just a little stupid thing I just did for like just 2 minutes because I'd lost my voice, and I was like, there's a few people I want to message and say sorry I couldn't go to, but actually I'll just chuck a quick video up there.
Yeah, no, it worked really well. And it's funny because I remember one of the initial use cases I was messing around with was, I think it's Synthesia, which is a similar kind of tool. And at the time you could use like digital avatars that they'd pre-created.
Yeah, they have kind of off-the-shelf people,
exactly,
don't they? Yeah, same with HeyGen as well.
And that was cool, because they talked about one of the main use cases being doing like training and creating training videos, and I was really impressed at the time. But this next level where you can actually create an avatar of yourself, that gets really interesting.
Yeah, and I only did the really basic version, so if you want, you can go a step further, and you could have got a green screen and had a cut-out version of you and all that kind of stuff. But the quality of it has improved so much, and they brought out a new version 2 weeks ago that's even better, and it can you could have a live interactive video conversation now with it. So their next version is that, which is quite impressive. And these are slightly silly use cases, but again, my role is to test this stuff, see where we can apply it. And joking aside, if I need to create, which I do, some training videos of me, it would take me ages to re-record and record links and edit it and all that stuff. And there are AI tools that are great for editing, forgetting that for a second, but now I can fundamentally just put in a script, and you can load in, if you pay for that plug-in part of it, you could just load in a PowerPoint deck, load in your script, or not load in script, get it to generate a script for you, and it will sync where it puts your avatar within the slide to the slides that you upload. So you can really quickly create digital presentations. But where that's really great is Digital Luke can speak French, German, Spanish, Italian, Japanese, like any language you want, which real Luke cannot. I mean, I speak a little bit of Spanish, not very well, a tiny bit of German, and maybe a tiny bit of French, but not enough to record a training video, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that is one of the really useful things, because there's something a lot more pleasant, isn't there, about that experience of watching something like that than just a plain old PowerPoint. And
quite often, I think when you get subject matter experts recording training videos, they're sometimes, it's not their background to talk and present it in a way that's particularly dynamic. Sometimes they can be quite deadpan and flat, but if you use them to create great material, create a digital avatar, they can be a bit more animated, or you can use, you can use the MD's digital likeness to present a really technical concept, and they can be personalised or customised, on the fly as well if you need to.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting to see where that goes. Let's change tack a little bit, because when we first met, one of the ideas that really grabbed my attention was the AI statement, and I actually took a photo of that and put that on my LinkedIn saying, I went and heard it, and that got a lot of traction. A lot of people saying, that's interesting. So for the benefit of the audience that maybe like me at that point hadn't heard about that, what is an AI statement?
Sure. So when I joined, one of the first things I wanted to do was get a public and that was one of my targets. When I first joined, it was one of the deliverables, was to what is our line in the sand, what we're comfortable doing or not doing, but also being really transparent about it. And there are things that back up that AI statement. There are things behind the scenes you need to do before you get to that point. But really, it's just so if you go to intergage.co.uk, go to the footer where you normally see terms and conditions, you can find our AI statement there. It's a public-facing document, and it just sets out how we will use AI, safely, legally, ethically, effectively, and just talks about some of the use cases where we will and will not use AI. And that came from, speaking to everyone within the organisation about what they're currently using it for, what would we use it for, but also importantly, potentially what we would not use it for. And I think the lines of that vary from organisation to organisation. And we're going to see, particular industries perhaps where they're, let's say copywriters, they might say, all of my copywriting is entirely human. That might become a USP that some people have.
Yeah.
When we talk about perhaps photo folks, we'll only ever use it to edit the background. We'll never use it to change a character or whatever those lines in the sand might be. There's a great PR agency locally that has an AI statement, and they say that we will use AI for this, this, and this, so recording meetings and transcribe meetings, etc. But we will not use it to create a press release. That will always be a human endeavour.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a really important and quite, I feel like I've used philosophical a lot, but again, it's an ethical, it's a business, it's a brand decision.
Yeah.
What are you happy to use AI for or not? Where are those lines? And I don't think that many organisations are having those conversations. And I think the danger with not having that conversation is within an organisation, you'll have people doing different things. Some of them are trying it. You might lock it down at a corporate level, but some people use ChatGPT on their phones to help them out do their job, right? Until you sit down and go, we'll use it for this, we won't use it for this. Consider some of the less shiny things, which not many AI people talk about. I spoke at a conference a couple of weeks ago, the VA conference, which was at the Hilton in Bournemouth, and someone came up to me after the show and said, I've been to a lot of AI talks. I really liked yours, but the thing that stood out for me was you were the first talk I'd heard discuss privacy, GDPR, security. And I thought, crap, that's not good. If, a lot of people are talking about AI and no one's saying, where's your data going? Is it being used in the training model? Have you considered, the GDPR implications of if I'm using this tool and there's personal identifiable information? So as a business, have all of those conversations. And for us, that wrapped up nicely into an AI statement that says, these are things we do. We ran a training session to everyone, and when they join, they'll get that training, and then we do a little assessment and we keep a register of that. And we've had 4 or 5 companies that have asked us, what is your AI use policy or statement? And we've been able to just point them to that. But to back that up, we also have, we have an audited list of which tools we will and won't use. We have a content checklist, which we talked about briefly earlier, to make sure that it's AI plus human. And we have other supporting things like that. With playbooks of best use and all that kind of stuff. And that's really, I think something that I'm really passionate about. I think pretty much every talk I give or panel, I'll bring up AI statements, because I think something we'll see happen a lot more and quite rapidly is in procurement, which again, not a particularly shiny thing to talk about if you're normally an AI speaker, but it's the sort of questions people are going to start asking. You've got cybersecurity, cyber essentials that people sometimes ask for, and ISO things, but actually, how do you use AI? How will you use AI with our data? What are you using it for? What are your use cases? What will you not use it for? And where you sit on that is it's a brand decision as much as it is a business or a technical decision, right?
Yeah. It's interesting you should mention procurement, because maybe my mind went there as well whilst you were talking, actually, because I was thinking a lot of kind of RFPs and so on are focused on things like ESG, and you could easily see a natural extension of that is like AI and what's your statement around AI. So I can imagine that's going to come pretty quickly.
I spoke at a charity event. Good Innovation have a group that they work with 10 charities that get together and talk about AI every now and again. And they invited me along to speak at their panel last week. And one of the things that came out of that was actually from a CSR or charity angle, what are the resources that these tools use? Like, what are the ethical implications of them? What's the data they're trained on? These are real considerations that I think more and more businesses are going to be asked about, particularly at first if you're in photography, copywriting, and those kind of immediate generative AI fields. But as time goes on, I think more and more people will be asked, what is your AI position? And a statement, policy, whatever it is. In the most part, we only made a few tweaks to our other things like HR policy or terms and conditions to include AI. And if we are potentially sharing data into, say, ChatGPT to do some analysis, and that might contain personal identifiable information, then obviously we'd need to update our data processing data processors. But yeah, I think I quite often start talks and say, who's using AI in their business, who has a statement or policy or process or whatever, and the contrast between those two numbers is quite stark. Generally speaking, 50-75% of a room are using AI in some form, I find at the moment. Generally, out of a room of say 30, 1 or 2 might have an AI statement. And that's quite a gap between those two things, right?
It's massive. Just out of curiosity, what's on the Intergage will not use AI for?
I think at the moment, like a big thing for us is always having a human in the loop. So if we're creating any content for either a customer or for our own website, we'll use AI through the process of ideation or discussing or rewriting sections. A great use of AI, I think, is you've written a blog post and now let's convert that into 5 LinkedIn posts or whatever it might be. We will always have a human in the loop. So that is a line in the sand. So we have a 15-step checklist for accuracy, quality, tone of voice, punctuation, because for some reason ChatGPT will always do bullet points with the word in bold, a semicolon, and then the rest of the bullet point. I don't know why, it's just like one of those quirks. So we have some of those common lookouts because I don't know if you've come across the term AI slop. I don't know if you've come across that, but actually, no. It's like the AI equivalent of spam. So you could, if you go on LinkedIn, can you tell if there's just a straight generated AI post?
I think you can. Like, there's something about it, isn't it? I was going to say that when you were talking.
Exactly.
Like, you do need the AI plus human because there is something just.
And that's one of our lines in the
isn't
sand.
there?
Is that we will always put any content through that 15-point check. And also, for our supporting documents, if our customers are saying, well, if you're using AI, isn't there a danger of hallucinations or facts are wrong or whatever, we can say no because we have this checklist and we follow that before anything goes out. I think there are really common things you can spot. So it loves the rocket ship emoji, it loves the word delve, it will use Z instead of S's in Americanizations, it does bullet points in a particular way. Generally speaking, you'll have a paragraph and then 3 or 4 bullet points of about 5 or 6 words, and each of those bullet points has a different emoji. There are patterns you can spot which are lazy, and it's not good content, right? There's no point using these tools to generate crap. Like, it can help you and it can shortcut it, but you still need a human in the loop. So that's one of a big one, but that's one of our red lines, so to speak.
So, I mean, you how would you summarise the importance then of an organisation having an AI statement?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I guess if you need one for procurement and you're going to lose contracts with not having one, then that's pretty important. I think it's one of those things where over time I'm seeing a couple more people each time saying they've got one, or and a follow-up question sometimes I ask is, has anyone been asked by a client, supplier, provider, what is your AI policy or statement, or what tools are you using? And there's generally around the similar or a couple more hands for that question than do you have an AI statement. I think what's important about it is the process to get to that point, and that's something that we identified as a bit of a need locally and wider afield, and why we've been working with Dorset Chamber on a thing called Campfire, which is really about how we can get businesses to make practical use of AI and what are some of the other things around it they need to think about.
Well, you've queued it up perfectly because that was
I might have known it was coming up, but
next subject on my list, because I think it's really clear, isn't it? AI, the way it's evolving so quickly, it brings new challenges, but also loads of new opportunity as well. So let's talk about Campfire then. I think you've mentioned that it's a partnership between Intergage and Dorset Chamber, but how tell us a bit about what it is.
Yeah, sure. So I did a workshop for the team there, and from that and from the conversations that arose from that, we came up with this thing because they were hearing and we were hearing people want, okay, there's AI talks out there, but what are the actual practical next steps? So what do we need to do? Do we need to do an audit of what's in use already? Do we need to put together a statement? Do we need to think about an audited list of tools? How do I know what tools to use? All of those kind of things. And so I've built, we Intergage, but predominantly me, have built a framework for adopting AI into small businesses, focused particularly on small and medium-sized businesses, because I think the big players are going to be talking to your KPMGs and your Ernst & Youngs and all those kind of big four consulting firms, whatever they're called. And actually, the British Chambers of Commerce did a survey a couple of months ago, and 42% of small businesses said they thought AI was important for them. It would lead to efficiency improvements, and they could see where it was useful, but only 25% were using AI. Right, so there's this huge gap there, as identified by the British Chamber of Commerce, which obviously the Chamber is part of. And so, we went to them and said, how about we do this together? You've got members that need help, and I'm not saying they're not using it at the moment, but I think most people, when you speak to them, they've tried a few tools. They've tried GPT a bit personally or professionally, or they may be using things like Otter and Firefly to record calls. But it's actually we looked at it as a way of, okay, let's what is the process for adopting it? How do you identify use cases within your business? Decide which ones to pilot. How do you do an effective pilot? I've always when I look at using technology in business, I always have kind of 4 levels. What are the strategic bits? So that's the red lines. We won't use it for writing a press release. We will use it for this. We won't use it for that. What do our customers expect of us? That's all kind of the strategic stuff. Then thinking about the tactical stuff. Okay, what are the use cases? How do we prioritize those and test a couple? What does success look like? How do what's the benchmark to compare it against? What are the right measures to do that? Then you look at the kind of the operational stuff. So, okay, how are we going to actually do that? What are the things we need to put in place? So, do we, when we create a use case, do we then write that up into a playbook of best practice? How do we store those? How do we put checks in place? What are all the other kind of practical things we need, like the content checklist, like the statement? And then communications. So how are we going to talk about what we're doing to the rest of the organisation or to our suppliers? What's the transparency we need to do? What are, and being very mindful of employees and how we approach AI, because I'm sure there'll be some people when, if their boss stood up and said, right, we're going to throw ourselves into AI as a business, some people will look at that and go, am I going to lose my job? Is it going to replace me? But, I think how you frame it and the way you approach it from a strategic onwards level, but also it is really important to work from the bottom up. What are people using at the moment? What are their use cases? And so, very much we put this workshop together. So it's a half-day workshop, and it covers a bit of an introduction to scene setting. Then we look at some example use cases. Then we do some practical exercises to work on what are some use cases in your organisation, and then we talk through some of the other stuff like the AI statement, the policies you might need to review, how you can run a pilot, how you can test a pilot. We ran our first one yesterday and had some really great feedback from that. I'm looking forward to doing the next one in November.
Yeah, no. So it's I think I need to definitely come along and check out one of those.
Yeah, next one in November.
It sounds really good. I was just thinking whilst you were talking again about that is another really key thing about having an AI statement, not just for your customers and all those external parties, but actually for the people working for you, because you might not want to work for a company that, like you say, is going to put potentially people out of work because of their use of AI. So,
and I think you might get to the point where, in the same way people consider going to work for an organisation and looking at what is their home or hybrid working policy, you might want to say what's their AI policy at some point in the future. I think it's really important. And the other side to Campfire is that something I find all the time is people want to talk to each other about how they're using AI. And so we're going to be following up in a couple of weeks by launching an online AI community and events for people that join that community that allows people to talk to each other about AI, to share use cases, to talk about the tools that they use, just as kind of, because it evolves continually, having a resource people can call on to keep them up to date, but also to chat to other people that are going through that journey. I'm sure you're the same. You've worked in different size organizations. When you work in a smaller company, you might be the one person that's leading that. You might have direction from the boss, or you might be the boss. And actually, you don't necessarily have a peer within your organisation to chat to about, have you tried this? I've got this problem. This isn't the right tool for me. What do I do? And so we're also going to launch that community side of it soon.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely invaluable. I think that community is critical with anything like this, to be honest. So I think when I was reading about Campfire, it's split into those kind of 3 phases, isn't it? Spark, Ignite and Build. Spark is basically the webinar
the introduction to,
which I watched, and I'd highly recommend to anyone. It is a really good intro.
Sorry, the purpose of that Spark bit. So really the point of Campfire is the half-day workshop and then the community onwards. But we realised that some people need to get to a basic level of understanding first. And we wanted the half day to be really focused on practical stuff. And so, yeah, the Spark bit there is just around setting the scene for what's in there. So it's free, 30-ish minutes webinar, just one that I was delivering that I recorded. That's scene setting for really that, it's about the Ignite, about getting started with it, and about the community is the main part. But yeah, that's free, that webinar. You can click that link and watch that.
And will you be sending digital, Luke, or is this are people going to get the real thing?
No, so absolutely, this is a real Luke will be turning up. But I mean, spoiler alert, digital Luke does make an appearance in the slides. Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned, and this bit wasn't planned, the fact that you actually had the first one yesterday.
Yeah.
But what were the kind of key takeaways and results and feedback from the day?
Yeah. Started small as always. The great way of doing it. Not a soft launch as such, but we had a good little group and had some really nice feedback from it. I got one. Actually, there was a post on LinkedIn. Can I read from it?
Yeah, go for it.
I think there was just a little quote at the end I really loved, which just said, so this is one of the attendees wrote a whole post just about the workshop they'd attended yesterday. Just said, thanks. But at the bottom it just said, if you're considering AI for business or using it already, I definitely recommend this session. And I just really loved that just in a nutshell. If I'd have asked them to write that as a statement, that would have been what I've asked for.
And that wasn't AI generated
by you? Not by me, but I don't know if they used AI to write it. But, when we ran a similar... So this is evolved from a previous workshop I used to run as a half-day session. The last time I ran one of those for around 20 small businesses, every single person that attended ticked the box that said, I would recommend this workshop to other people. Yeah. Every single person. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah,
the thing I always aim for is that people take actual real stuff away, and everyone in their feedback said they took stuff away from it. And that was the same yesterday as the first Campfire one, as previous workshops I've run. So I'm really pleased and proud about that.
No, I can imagine. I mean, I took stuff away from 15 minutes. So I can imagine
that was hard actually.
Would be pretty good.
Having a brief that's kind of what I'd normally do in half an hour, 45 minutes at least, in a 15-minute. I quite liked it and focusing the mind on, okay, which key bits do I need to put in here?
Yeah, no, it worked really well. I think just to round off this whole conversation on AI then, it's a big question, but are you optimistic about the future of AI?
Are we talking in terms of the impact on jobs or just generally for the technology, or because they're kind of slightly different questions?
Yeah, well, give us your take on both aspects of that question.
I've put my cards on the table already. I'm quite a geek. I love technology, and I think the thing I hadn't necessarily expected, say 2 years ago, was how much this would help develop robotics and some of the other areas. I drive an electric van. I'm really passionate about EV technology. They've made big strides in battery technology through AI by using it to do material science research. So, we're already seeing use cases like in breast cancer. There's already an AI now that is significantly better at spotting breast cancer earlier. I think these things are great advances for human civilization. So yeah, I'm optimistic about it as a technology. I think the jobs question comes up quite a lot because, if you talk about the point, which is soon, probably, I think certainly in the next 6 months, a year, where you could conceivably have, customer service type roles where 95% perhaps, done by AI very successfully using natural language, not press 1 for this. That is going to have an impact. But I look back at, so there is a challenge there that I think, we do need to address. And as business leaders, to think about if you're doing these things, do we always need to have a human in the loop? What are actually our goals? And if we're doing anything like that, what are we doing with our staff? How are we addressing that? But I look at what happened when spreadsheets come out. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but when spreadsheets first came out, there was an association in America of bookkeepers and ledger writers or something like that. And they were like, this is going to lead to massive job losses. And so there was a government agency in America that tracked the amount of people that worked as bookkeepers and ledgers over time from spreadsheets onwards. And yeah, it's a massive downward spike, right? But do you know what happened with management accountants? Right? Management accountants went up more than that went down. So the challenge there is, if you're just looking at that one point, yes, there is a downside to it, but there was an upside on the other. And so actually the challenge is skills. The gap there is skills and knowledge of using these tools. And that's why I'm also really passionate about sharing what I'm learning with as many people as possible, because there will be some roles that are, going to be impacted by the use of AI technology, but there's going to be whole new job types that come out that I don't even know what they are. I remember giving a talk years ago, Digital Wave, which was like a careers conference at the BIC. And, when I was talking, I sort of said, look, people were saying, what skills should we learn now? What programming language is one of the questions? And I sort of said, I don't really know what the jobs are going to be soon. And, a year later, TikTok influencing was a job, which wasn't a job a year ago. If I look back 20 years, people making money selling ringtones on phones, right?
Yeah.
That's a job that's come and gone with technology.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some, undoubtedly, and I think it's unrealistic to say there won't be some impacts, but I really believe that the difference there is a skills difference, not necessarily just directly in a job loss way. But we do need to consider those things. We do need to look at how can we upskill people, how can we train people, what are the new areas it enables. I think, for example, we'll see more smaller businesses because people can do more things themselves, and that will open up things like people that do things like virtual assistants, for example. I think there might be an increase in need for their services because, some of the things historically they might have done, like transcription perhaps, will have decreased. But actually, if you've got more people running a business themselves because they can do more of it with AI, you're going to need some people to help you out with those bits of kind of office admin that you get as part of being in a larger organisation. So some winners, some losers, I think is my my little headline on that.
Yeah, no, really good, really interesting take. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said there. Sadly, we're reaching the final straight of the podcast, and I wanted to switch back and talk a little bit more about Luke, the person. As you know, one of the themes of this podcast is happiness.
Yeah.
That what can be a tiny little word, we learn it as a kid, but can seem really complex in the modern world. So I just wanted to ask, what for you is the true meaning of happiness?
So when you sent me this through as a question, one of the things I considered was it's quite a big philosophical question, and something that I saw on a webinar during the peak of lockdown actually really stuck with me for the last 4 years. And they were talking about happiness in adversity. So like in challenging times, finding moments of joy. And that sort of phrase, moments of joy, has always really stuck with me. And I think, there are ways of finding that are happiness. For me, it might be up a mountain or being in the sea, bodyboarding or paddleboarding or swimming or whatever it is. But actually just happiness for me is finding moments of joy where I can. And I have some go-to stupid videos on YouTube that I might use. Tom Holland doing Umbrella is just, I think, one of the funniest things ever done. And so, for me, happiness is finding moments of joy when things might be harder, because I think that's really important, being able to do that as well. And it's something that I've made a conscious effort to do better since the pandemic, particularly.
I really love that answer. That's actually a new take on it I've not heard. I really like that. It's funny you should mention all those kind of activities that you use for finding those moments of joy, because I noticed that you mentioned somewhere that you've managed to achieve not one but 2 Guinness World Records. I had to ask whilst
I think
I've got you.
Unfortunately, currently only on one. So I have to give a bit of context to that. Is that okay?
Yeah,
so,
go for it.
When I was 18, really sadly, my dad died quite suddenly and unexpectedly. And I went through, obviously, a period of grief. And it's quite a challenging time as a young man anyway. But when I came out of that, one of the things I did was I just sat down and just wrote, what do I want to do? Like, what's my bucket list of items? And that, for me, has been a real, like a guiding principle that's been behind the scenes for a long time. And that was one of the things that was on my list, right, was to have a Guinness World Record. And when I first put it on there, I was like, I'm not that great at something that I think could get me a world record. And so I started sort of looking around for like, what are the things that I could, like, what are Guinness World Records? And I had the opportunity to join the largest beer tasting that happened. And so I'm technically, I've got a little certificate from when I took part of, I took part in a Guinness World Record beer tasting I was part of however many thousand people it was that tasted these 5 given beers. And I had to sign up for a few things like that before I got one that actually worked, because some of them, one of them didn't get enough people. Well, actually, no, 2 that I tried to do didn't get enough people, so I ended up doing these slightly silly things that like I might not, the one that, I can say this, I'm not embarrassed about it, but the one that I was most gutted about, which I think would have been brilliant, was there was a charity that was going to do the largest skinny dip, according to Guinness World Records, over at Studland and the Naturist Beach. Right. So I signed up for this event where basically there was a tent and a couple of thousand people were going to just throw their clothes off, run in and out of the sea. And unfortunately, there was really bad weather for the date and the backup date, and so it was cancelled. But wouldn't that have been a great Guinness World Record to be known? Like, I took part in the world's largest skinny dip.
That would have been proper success on the south coast,
definitely,
wouldn't it?
Right? But yeah, they never rearranged it. They cancelled those 2 dates, and as far as I know, it never happened again. So
what, are we going to take this opportunity?
I don't know. Let's not go there. But I think for me, it was just one of those things that when I first wrote the list, and there was some obvious stuff on there like jump out of a plane, go to Australia, write a book, release a record, do a radio show, have a TED talk. There's lots of stuff in there. I really took time to write this list, and I added to it as time went on, and I took a few off. One of the things on there when I first wrote it was I really wanted to have a Lotus Elise, but I that changed to having owning an electric vehicle. So that goal changed and evolved. But yeah, I think that was one of the ones that I really, when I first wrote it down, like, right, I want to get a Guinness World Record for something. I thought I'm gonna have to learn some really obscure skill and spend thousands of hours practicing something. I'm not saying I'm lazy, and I would have done that, but I realised that there was an easier way to do it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think as a way to kind of live your life, it's really important to almost set yourself those goals. Yeah. And like you say, they evolve over time, right? And you're going to complete some, and some are going to slightly change. Yeah. But it's a great way of living, I think. So, and it also, even better than that, kind of lines up the next question, because another theme around this podcast is trying to talk to people like yourself and understand what true success is, dispel that myth that how it might be portrayed on social media. So I just wonder again for you, like, how would you describe success?
Yeah, so for me, it's probably, it is ticking things off that bucket list. I've got 2 things left on there from the list, and a while ago I took the decision to take to not add more holiday destinations on there, because for a while I did have a few on there, but I have 2 things left on that bucket list, and for me that's success, because there was some, there was a wide range of things on there, and I'm quite happy and lucky that I've got to that point. It's not luck, it's choices I've made, but I feel fortunate that I've been able to do that, and part of that is just having my eyes open to opportunities when they arose, and saying yes to things I might have hesitated over or not done previously.
What are the 2 things left then before you can tick off?
I should have. Yeah, that's obvious question. So one was, and it was in the original list, which is why I left it in there. Seeing the pyramids. I've never actually seen the pyramids, and the reason I haven't done that yet is because I think that's quite an easy one. I can do that kind of at any point. Just book a holiday and flight and go and do it. And that. The other one is quite ambitious. It's go to space. Now, when I wrote that, this is longer ago than I'd like to admit. I think that is going to be still realistic in my lifetime, and it's going to be you see things like Virgin Galactic where you can get a flight that goes up to space and comes back down again. The price of that at the moment is similar to the first transatlantic flights. So if you extrapolate that forwards 10, 20 years time, I think maybe as a retirement present to myself, I might be able to afford a trip into space. But yeah, that's the only real one left. And actually, I had a birthday recently, and I was thinking I need to sit down and write some more for my list, because I realised that I'd done pretty much everything on my list, and actually space is a little bit out of my control right now. And I went off to Iceland at the start of the year, and I've seen the Northern Lights. Ironically, not when I was in Iceland, but from the UK in May, which, it's great. I booked a thing to do it, and it still happened this year. The 2 events weren't the same. But yeah, I need to sit down and put some more things on there, because I think that's something I need to sit down and do.
Well, what a brilliant thing to be able to say that you've ticked off all those things that you sat down and wrote out, and I'll be intrigued to hear what gets added to the list as well.
I honestly don't know yet, and I'd be welcome to any suggestions.
Well, if you've got any
suggestions
out there,
It's like a YouTube video. Leave a comment below.
I'm going to finish then with a feature I called Life by Misadventure, and as we were talking earlier, this is just because I found from my own experience of doing random things, whether it's playing in bands or something, you kind of learn really useful lessons and skills along the way that you wouldn't necessarily have learnt through your day-to-day kind of working life.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, from your point of view, what's a lesson you've learnt from an unexpected source? Weirdly,
this was the bit I was most dreading / found most hardest to prepare, because I kind of look back and nothing was really jumping to mind. But then, I almost randomly once bought a book called The Luck Factor. It's by a guy called Richard Wiseman, and it absolutely, in a lot of ways, has changed my life. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, this book changed my life," and it's just essentially it's just a book about what are lucky or unlucky people. And the spoiler alert, the conclusion is basically a couple of little things that the difference between lucky people that self-report as lucky or unlucky generally is people just being open and observant. So they said that one of the experiments that they talk about is there was a study somewhere where they invited participants to this study, and as is classic, the actual study was before they got into the waiting room. They had some money on the floor between where they entered the building and where the waiting room was, and the lucky people, in a much higher percentage, spotted the money. And actually the behaviour there is they're just observant, they just look around in their surroundings a bit more. And so I've always had that in the back of my mind. And the other thing was just around lucky people in terms of life experiences are quite often because they've said yes when other people would say no. So they're also open to opportunities. And so part of what I always did with my bucket list was when an opportunity to tick something off came along, I jumped at it because I had it on my list and it was kind of in the back of my head. And those cropped up at really random moments sometimes. So I used to be terrified of heights, and I can honestly say it's pretty much been cured since jumping out of an aeroplane. Now, I was lucky enough to present, wasn't lucky, I was fortunate, and I always try and correct myself when I say that. I presented a new music radio show for a number of years, locally and syndicated out, and I had a guest on the show that I knew through clubbing, and I don't know why, but when I was interviewing him, it came up about bucket lists. I think he said, doing this or something on my bucket list. I said, I've had a bucket list. And I just sort of almost offhand said, I'd love to jump out of a plane. And he said, actually in my day-to-day life, I'm a parachute instructor. So 2 weeks later, I was jumping out of a plane. I didn't really almost get a chance to think about it. But if I hadn't had that list, if I hadn't been open to that opportunity, was that luck? Was that fortune? Was that being open to the possibility? So my, and it's not quite, I don't know if it's quite answers the question, but for me, the life lesson is just luck is life is what you make it, and luck is kind of a bit of an illusion. It's about being open to things. There's fortune and probability and things like that, but I read that book, and I'm quite a scientifically minded guy anyway, but I honestly think it's being open to things. It's having your eyes open, not spending your life walking around looking at your phone, looking at the world around you. You'll spot things that you might see an open day sign somewhere you've never experienced, or you might spot a tenner on the floor or whatever it is, I don't know. But that is luck, is you can make your own luck.
I really, really love this answer. I've got to read this book, actually. It sounds fascinating. Yeah. I think the whole...
Richard Wiseman, The Luck Factor.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description, I think, as well. But I'm going to grab myself a copy. I think the whole idea of luck is a fascinating subject. We could probably do another podcast just on that. So maybe we'll do a follow-up on that subject. But unfortunately, that does bring us to the end. And I just want to say, Luke, I've absolutely loved having you here. It's been a really fun conversation. So in true tradition of podcasts, for people who want to get in touch with you, what are the best links?
Yeah, sure. So we can include them below. But yeah, absolutely connect me on LinkedIn if you'd like to know more about what we're doing. We'll include a link to Campfire, because I think if you're particularly small or medium-sized business and you're starting to tinker with AI, I've got to put the plug in, but we've built this based on need that we've seen out there. But yeah, drop me a line through LinkedIn is a good way of getting in touch.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it earlier, but I really love your AI actionable insights
blog.
Yes,
I should absolutely have mentioned that there. Thank you.
Seeing as you did, and I'll mention that, we'll also put a link into that, but that's a really good read.
Thanks.
it is exciting, it's interesting, it's scary all at the same time, AI technology, but it's really awesome to speak to someone like you who I think is really kind of demystifying that for people and helping local businesses. This is all about success on the South Coast, and I really think that there's a huge opportunity, like you said, for these small businesses to leverage your expertise and that of your community. So I hope we'll do a follow-up maybe on luck, but also to see how it changes, because in a year's time this might be a very different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the pace of change is insane, so I really don't know. You know, when people say where are we going to be in 3 or 5 years' time, I say hands up, no idea.
Yeah, well, I think that's as good a place to leave it as anyway. So thanks again, Luke, for coming.
Pleasure, thank you.